Hey everybody, thank you for joining us after that short little break. Want to jump into our real estate roundup segment, which is why the housing market is not the next domino to fall after the stock market and international markets have been affected to the extent at which they have. So I'm going to start this one off by saying here's why it's not the next domino to fall. Number one, the stock market and international markets are in their own space. Too many people have this false connotation that they run hand in hand. Do they affect each other? Yes, but you're going to see those effects play themselves out over time and again in a less direct way. But again, Tesla's stock going up or down is not going to directly affect housing prices. It does not affect the demand for houses. It does not affect the price for which houses are sold. I think a lot of people think and assume they're tied together just because that's a part of our economy, as is the housing industry. But again, those are just two separate spaces. So that's where I wanted to start off with that one. What does affect the housing industry? Interest rates. That does affect the housing industry. Why? Because my ability to now borrow becomes more expensive, both short term and long term. So interest rates fluctuating does have a direct correlation on the housing market, as does inflation, because interest rates and inflation essentially run hand in hand. Inflation, as long as it continues to go up, interest rates will continue to go up, because that's essentially the offsetting piece that our federal government tries to use to get a grapple on inflation specifically. So for those of you that ask the question, when are interest rates going to stop rising? As soon as inflation stops rising. And fair to say, we've never seen this much inflation in this time frame, but it is what it is at the end of the day. And again, interest rates will continue to rise as long as inflation continues to rise. With that said, that's why the housing market is not the next domino to fall, just because stocks and the international markets have changed their paths.
Yeah, and definitely understand that. And we've talked about this a few times of when you're ready to buy, be ready to buy when you're ready to buy. And that means don't look at and try to judge or time the market based on what you think is going to happen with it. If you're needing to buy in the next year, it honestly doesn't matter what the markets do. Maybe if you're worried about losing a job or something like that, sure. But again, if you're ready to buy and you're in a good spot, or if you want to be ready to buy by a certain time, you want to make sure that you're taking those steps necessary to get there instead of worrying so much about it, about what inflation is doing for the housing market, what interest rates are doing, how many houses are on the market. It all
Yep.
doesn't matter. At the end of the day, do you need to buy? Do you want to
Right.
buy? Well, put yourself in the best situation possible and move forward. A lot of people also don't understand that when it comes to the housing market and buying and selling and what housing prices do, it can be affected by what interest rates are doing. Low interest rates mean more people are able to borrow money, which means housing prices, like we saw in the last few years, tend to go up. Whereas now they're starting to flatten out. We're not seeing houses going for an obscene amount of money. People just can't borrow as much. But at the end of the day, it's still basic supply and demand. So, how many houses are available for sale and how many buyers are out on the market? And that's going to determine whether it's a hot or a cold market. It has nothing to do with anything else. Doesn't matter if the stock market is up, doesn't matter if the stock market is down.
Yeah.
It purely is based on who wants to buy and how many people want to sell. So, keep that in mind before you start trying to base a decision on what you and your family should do
Right.
for what you're hearing the stock market is doing. Could you get a better
And
interest rate if you wait? Sure. But is that, again, worth living in your parents' basement for another 2 years until
yeah,
interest rates go below 5% again?
no, and I've heard a few really good tidbits here in the last week, whether it be from a podcast I listened to or talking with individuals. Here's a couple of them. One, marry the house, date the rate. You
Mm,
probably heard that one, Jay, in the
yeah.
industry. Maybe you haven't, but you
Yeah.
just
Your
have
rate is
then
your
if you
side
haven't.
chick. Yeah. The house is
Right.
a,
Exactly.
a bad relationship, if that's it.
But yeah, marry the house, date the rate. Interest rates change. Even if you look at an interest rate like, oh, I'm at 6%. A, can you afford that long term? B, no interest rate has ever stayed the same for 30 years. So stop thinking that's going to be your only rate available to you for 30 years. Like, number two, worry more about your time in the market versus trying to time the market. Too many people are asking, is now a good time to buy? I would say, and again, something I came across just this last week when someone else was answering that question, they say, if someone's asking me that question, they're not ready to buy. Once they stopped asking themselves, is now a good time to buy?
Yeah.
Then they're ready, because there's too much doubt for whatever reason. They've listened to too many headlines, read too many headlines that are doubting it. So they're asking the question, is now a good time to buy? What's not a deal now is a deal in 10 years. Fact.
Yep.
There's not one place in this country that 10 years ago, someone to this day owns and bought from 2012. And there's that house just isn't worth anything today. Like in California, I did those numbers. I think 2012, the average cost of a home was, I think it was like in the 300,000 mark, right? Today, the average home in California is 863,000. And you cannot convince me that in 2002, someone looked at that house for in around 350,000 and said, God, this is such a steal. Oh my
Yeah.
God, this is going to be worth so much. They're saying,
Yeah.
this is maxing me out right now.
Yep.
But you know what? This is worth it. Here's my last one that I got from this week. Jay, kid's 32 years old. I'll just randomly. Do you think he owns more than 10 houses, 100 houses, or 500 houses? 32 years old.
More than 10 houses would be
More than 10. More than 10, but less than 100?
Yeah.
Let me redirect that question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This kid owns 670 homes. He's 32 years old. And his little fun quote was, look, real estate has a funny way of making you look really good for your past decisions. And he said, the only times I've lost money is when I chose not to take that deal.
Yeah.
Like real estate is a really good space to get into. So for those of you just debating on your first home, is now a good time to buy it. This kid owns 670 of them and he's 32 years old. But he'll also tell you what I did 10 years ago. Like real estate will make it look like you know what you're doing. I had no idea what I was doing. I just know I was leveraging the equity.
Yep.
First time home buyers and current home buyers. I was leveraging that equity and getting into my next house. So if you know the rules of the game and you know how to use that to your benefit, it's virtually always a good time to buy. It's just a matter of, like Jay said, can you afford to do it? If you can, shit on the pot and get off. Yep. Let's go. And let's move to the next one. Stop just sitting there and be like, text on my phone. I've got tomorrow. I've got next week. Yeah. Now next week, it's more expensive. Oh, it's more expensive. Is it worth it now? 10 years from now, you're either going to be kicking yourself saying, I should have got in 10 years ago because I could have. Or you're going to say, that was the best decision I made 10 years ago.
Yep. And it's always those people that are like, oh, yeah, I just bought a house. And now they wait 10 years and the house has doubled in value. And they're like, wow, this is amazing. And someone's like, oh, I missed that boat. It's like, no, you never got on it. You weren't even in line for the boat. Don't pretend like you missed out on something. You just weren't ready to do it. And
then let's segue into those naysayers. Nope, we're about to hit a bubble. Let's back up to 2002 for LA homeowners. They've seen 255% appreciation, including 40% depreciation, which is the only time in our history, by the way, that we've ever seen that much depreciation. But for those of you that want to hang on to the only time in history, they've still seen 255% appreciation. You're just like, okay, that sounds like a lot. How much is that? If someone spent $500,000, which would have been ridiculous amount of money in 2002 for a California home, if someone spent $500,000 today, after that 40% depreciation in mind, that house is worth $1.275 million. Fact. So for those of you that are saying, but Nick, it's going to be a bubble and things are going to lose value. Fast forward 20 years, I can promise you, you're going to make that times a lot of percent.
Yeah.
So stop telling yourself, yeah, but it's just not a good time. When is the right time to do anything? It's now, and it was 10 years ago.
Yep, exactly. First best time to plant a tree 30 years ago. Next best time right now. So anyone that, again, keeps referencing 2008 or being like, well, I saw this. Well, okay, armchair economist, let's calm down. Slow your roll there. Let's look at what is actually happening.
And for those, again, those people that want to hang on to 08, please leave a comment below to JRI when the last time our economy before 08 had that, again, in our history. Because you're never going to find it. So stop acting like every 10 to 15 years we're due for it. Stop. Because again, it's not a cyclical thing and history will tell you that.
Yeah.
So
nope. Go back. Yeah. Look at the dot-com bubble. Look at the 84, 86, the late 80s when inflation was high again. Housing market was not hit that same way. Sure. Did people slow down buying or were people buying less because of interest rates? Yep. They bought. The housing market wasn't super hot. Yeah. Does it mean that anyone that bought during that time regrets it? Not at all.
And here's two distinctly different things. One distinctly different thing and one thing to address home prices real quick. One, the 08 situation was caused by oversupply. You know what we have today? A massive undersupply. Those are two massively different housing spaces that we find ourselves in. So again, all the more reason you're not comparing apples to apples. And in the 08 years, we're in an oversupply of homes. Like that is not comparing apples to apples. If we were at I don't know, 8 months of housing supply right now and prices were doing weird things, like then you'd be comparing two very similar housing markets. You're not. Second thing on that, then some of you say, but Nick, home prices are dropping. the housing market is always shifting, right? It never stays the exact same, whether it be interest rates changing it a little bit, mixing it up because it makes it borrowing easier or harder,
Yeah.
whether it be, again, the supply of homes, whatever the case is, shifting. Today, we're shifting, and you have individuals that wanted to say, hey, I really don't want to sell my home, but hell, if I can get 1.5 mil, let's do it. And you've got some of those people that have listed their homes at a price that they said, I really don't need to sell, don't really want to sell, but I'll put it on for that. And now they have to make decisions because now that
Yeah.
things have slowed down, those are the types of homes you're seeing more of to say price reduction, right? If they still want to sell, or maybe they just pull
Yep.
out of the market altogether because they don't really need to sell. So we're in such a frenzy for 2 years because of the lack of supply that you had people that would push the boundary to say, okay, that house down the block, last month it sold for 1.2. I'm putting mine on for 1.3. And if that one sold for 1.3, the one that wants to sell in 2 months said, I want to sell for 1.45. And I think that's naturally what you're seeing with some of these price reductions, where it's not across the board. But again, it does take a little bit of time to say, okay, how much is it shifting? I had an open house this weekend, didn't have one body walk through it. What do we want to do, seller? Do we want to keep it at that price and potentially have not another pair of eyes see this thing? Or do we want to drop it 200 grand? And these are over $1 million homes, by the way, that I'm giving an example, right? Now, if it's 500,000, you have decisions to make. Do you want to drop it to 575? Do you want to drop to 550? Things for sellers to consider that don't affect everybody, but they are affecting somebody. And again, perspective matters.
There's our big talk about housing market. Is it leveling out just like we said it would? Sure. Is it crashing? No, not on your life. You're not going to go buy a house for $80,000 that was $500,000 the month before. It's not happening. Everyone's not foreclosing on their house. They have too much equity built up in it. Sorry, 2008 isn't happening. This isn't anything like it. Strap in because, we're still in a healthy market. And if you have any questions, reach out to a professional to actually figure out if now is a good time to buy. So, Nick, great conversations. We will take a very short break, and then we're going to come back to Business Bookend, where we're going to be talking about growing a business through relationships, both online and off. If you want to do things in the 21st century when it comes to growing your business, you won't want to miss it. So join us right after this.